Hello and welcome to the Tower of London. Welcome inside the Chapel Royal of St Peter ad Vincula for today's Thought for the Day. Now, during this last week, I've been dipping in and out of a book of theology written by the American priest and theologian Timothy Radcliffe. In one of his chapters, he talks about the two German pastors and theologians, Dietrich Bonhoeffer and Martin Niemöller. And it's about Martin Niemöller that I would like to say a few things this morning. Niemöller was born in northwest Germany in the town of Lippstadt in 1892. I know Lippstadt a little bit because there were British soldiers based there when I was serving in Germany. He came from a conservative, evangelical, moderately middle-class family. He was a clever lad and did well at school. And at the end of his schooling, when he took his Abitur, he did extremely well and could have gone straight on to university, but decided instead, because he was so fascinated with submarines, which were just coming into their fore at this time, that he wanted to join the German Imperial Navy. After his training, he served as a young officer on the first U-boats, a U-3. As the years went by, he served progressively on a U-3, a U-73, and then at the outbreak of the First World War on U-51 submarines. By then, he was a navigation officer. During the First World War, his submarine and the team that he was working with were very successful. In fact, at one point, their class submarine and their team were responsible for 55,000 tons of shipping being sunk, but Allied shipping, in fact, being sunk, for which he was awarded the Iron Cross First Class. At the end of the First World War, he went to university and then trained as a pastor. Between the First World War and the Second World War, and the rise of Hitler and Nazism in Germany, he became very uncomfortable and became outspoken against Hitler. By the start of the Second World War, though, he volunteered again to join the German Navy, but on the basis of age, he was turned down. But he was also extremely outspoken. And as a result of this, he was arrested and sent to Sachsenhausen concentration camp. He spent 7 years in a concentration camp, finishing up in Dachau. In his book, Vom U-Boot zum Kanzel, From the U-Boat to the Pulpit, he talks very movingly about how he managed to escape being executed right up to the point of his release. After the war, he went on to be a pastor, and he finished up in Wiesbaden. During his time, and he died in 1984 at the grand old age of 92, from the end of the Second World War until he died, he was a great advocate of pacifism and nuclear disarmament, and he worked tirelessly for reconciliation. He said throughout his life that he was ashamed and saddened that he hadn't done more for young Christian Germans at the time of the Second World War. He did everything he could to build reconciliation between Germans and Brits, between Germans and Americans, and in particular between Germans and the Japanese. In the 1970s, he was in America, and he was interviewed by an American journalist. The journalists by then were fascinated by a poem that he had written called First They Came for the Jews. He's remembered particularly for his book and for this particular poem, which I'm going to read for you in a second and will also be in the newsletter on Thursday. So let me read it to you. First they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. The American journalist asked him what he meant by that final part. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak out for me. Niemöller hoped that when anybody read that poem, they would put themselves in the place of that final statement and ask themselves, who would they speak out for? I'm left with that thought today. Who will I speak out for? And I ask you, who will you speak out for?